I'm really excited to talk about context documents. We're going to use a who, what, how framework to think about how we're going to create context documents that are going to instruct our AI projects. What are context documents? They're documents that give the AI projects some understanding and context about your blog and your business, and it also gives them instructions to execute the processes you want them to go through, or gives them instructions to create the documents you want help creating. Why are they important? This is where you get the AI to be more specific. Context documents gives the AI what it needs to successfully produce the outcomes you're looking for. If you had a new employee, you'd have to give them an employee handbook and then instructions or standard operating procedures to follow to get successful outcomes from that employee. The analogy I like to use is if you had a pizza shop and you had a new employee, it's important for the employee to know what kind of customers you serve, whether or not it's teenagers from the high school across the street who come and get food before their afternoon program practices and after, and then pick up a bunch of boxes to head to a party that night. Or if you're serving clients in the 30 to 40-year-old range who are looking for a relaxing evening, either as a date or with friends, to spend time in a nice atmosphere, spend some time together, enjoy some really unique, interesting food they wouldn't make at home. That's important context for a new employee to have when they talk to a new customer, answer the phone, prepare a pizza to go out to the client. So context documents work as that employee handbook and or the instructions about how to execute a specific task. So I'm going to walk through some examples of who documents, what documents, and how documents. They do generally fit into these categories, but I want to be clear that none of them are strictly about the who, and none of them are strictly what or how. There is some overlap and redundancy throughout all of these documents, but you can get a sense of what the primary role of that specific document is. And there's going to be redundancy because that helps make it extremely clear to the AI that branding principle in the brand and style guide gets executed, that theory or that intention is getting executed in this particular way when we're talking about how we box up the pizza to go, for example. The two major who documents that we're going to talk about are a brand and style guide and an ideal client guide. You could potentially have some other kind of who documents, especially if you were going to be hiring somebody. So you're about to hire a VA. You might be designing a different kind of who document to use in your AI system. But for the sake of this mini course and trying to make sure that some of these processes are a little bit more narrowed down, we're going to keep it to writing recipes, publishing blog posts, and thinking about reusing that for Instagram captions or email copy. In this case, these are going to be our primary who documents. Brand and Style Guide is a larger document, and Brand and Style Guide is going to cover a lot of information. And I want to say there's a lot of layers in which you could approach this. Brand and Style Guide, very basic level, would say who you are, what you do, maybe what's on your about page. It might have your brand colors, your logo, and your typography of choice. Brand has become such a huge thing, especially in the world of AI, and I think it's really important for us to think a lot deeper than those surface level ideas about what brand is when we start to go to a brand and style guide. It's about how you show up and how you talk to your audience in every platform and about what. And we'll get into the nitty-gritty about this in, I think, 2 videos. We'll talk about what all could go into a brand and style guide. know this would be an ever-evolving document. This is something that I would come back to every few months and just double-check, does that feel like where we want to be, what we're trying to achieve, and does that sound like my voice at this time? The next document that's really helpful is an ideal client profile. And if you've been blogging for a while, I'm sure you've heard the advice of you should figure out exactly who you're talking to. An ideal client profile is going to spell out exactly who you're talking to and how you're trying to serve them. What are their pain points? If you can get as specific as their age range, where they might live, their challenges they face in their life related to cooking, all of those details, the more specific you can get, the better. And this will help tailor the way the AI helps you construct instructions and promotes your recipes in writing. If your ideal client is a beginner cook, you're going to add in a lot more about how to do really simple things in the kitchen, and that's not going to sound condescending to a very new cook who has absolutely no idea how to deal with the fundamentals of cooking. If your ideal client is a seasoned cook who's trying to figure out how to cut dairy out of their diet, that's going to be a different set of instructions you might give them. And this, getting those nailed down, can help you figure out if you are covering all the bases with your content, and the AI project can use this as context to prompt you to make sure you're giving thorough enough information to your ideal client or ideal reader. What document? These, in a lot of ways, are the most simple documents for the most part to produce. You're just going to create a document of 10 example posts that I would pick your favorite posts or the posts you think are formatted the best or the posts that are formatted in a way that feels the most consistent to the way you want to be formatting blog posts. You might have an outlier or two in terms of how a blog post might be written, and that might be important context to put in the document along with the blog post examples. I have primary recipe posts on my website, but I do have some informational blog posts about beans and lentils and their historical context and or nutritional information. Those blog posts are formatted a little bit differently than the recipe ones, so I will indicate that those are not the standard recipe formats versus the standard recipe formats. So that's pretty easy. You can copy and paste the format from your blog and put those into an example document. Sitemap can be really helpful if you want the AI project to help you identify internal linking opportunities, and I am surprised at how good it is at helping you find internal linking opportunities, both with pages and categories. And niche-specific resources is something that may or may not apply to you. I am obsessed with beans and lentils, and that is the area I want to become the stronger authority in on the internet. Now, there's a lot of wonderful health benefits about beans and lentils, but I am not a nutritionist, and I am not a food scientist. I have no credentials to make claims like that. So I have a document that instructs the ChatGPT to help make sure that if I make a health claim, that I also reference the academic study in which that health claim is backed up. So I have a set of academic studies that demonstrate some of those well-known health claims about beans, and my AI knows that if I'm saying that they need to reference one of those specific documents. You may or may not need something like that, but I just wanted to put that in there because that's, again, where you can get really specific on informing your AI project about your point of view and your unique way of explaining things. How documents. Now, this is the instructions. SOP stands for Standard Operating Procedure, and this would be the step-by-step instructions in which you would be asking, in this case, project to help produce something. If it was somebody in your kitchen for the pizza shop, it would be how you wanted them to mix the pizza dough, let it rise, get out the ingredients, chop the ingredients. You're going to grab mozzarella cheese, shredded mozzarella cheese in this situation, and you're going to grab fresh mozzarella in this situation. So you can put in some logic where the AI has some choices depending on what you're asking it to do. But you're going to try to give it as many instructions about how it should be making the asset that you're going to make. Workflows. I think about workflows as when you string together a bunch of tasks. So I think of the SOP for a recipe card, and then I would have a SOP for how to run an SEO report about that particular keyword associated with that recipe. And then I might have an SOP for helping clarify what needs to go into the blog post and then drafting the blog post. And if I strung all those together, to me that's when it becomes a workflow. And it's not an AI agent in the way some people describe it, but it starts to become a stream of information and tasks that starts to feel like this AI project is synthesizing information from multiple layers of tasks. So that's how I think about workflows, when you start to string multiple SOPs or multiple tasks into the same project. Team collaboration. Whenever you work in a group environment, there's some communication norms that get set. And you might start at a job or your new pizza shop job, and somebody says, oh, let me know if you have any questions. But then when it comes time to ask a clarifying question, your employer is frustrated. Or you realize that this pizza that you were instructed to make tastes terrible, and you feel like you should tell the owner, but the owner has never given you an opportunity to give them feedback. So I think it is wise when working with humans to be sure to leave room for clarifying questions and constructive criticism so that you're continually improving along the way. I think the same thing is true for when you're working with a tool that is as powerful as AI. There are a lot of details to remember when you're creating recipes and publishing for food blogging. And you can bake in a lot of the logic into these instructions. And so when you forget a detail, the AI will remind you to provide that information. So to me, that is one of the really powerful things about this tool, is you can instruct it to have some checks and balances that will help you go a little bit deeper. Think about another little tip that you should be providing. It will give you a lot, but if you're missing something, if it needs a crucial piece of information, you can prompt it to tell you. Now, I will say, if you're not explicit about this from the beginning, it'll just try to be a people pleaser employee who does not have the guts or the inclination to say, hey, I couldn't do that the way you told me to, or in the way that makes sense in the greater context of the business. It'll just give you a product. So I like to bake that logic in to any context document I have. And a lot of times that means just saying, be sure to ask clarifying questions if the user or Nora did not provide all of the information you need to finish this task completely. Okay, we got the who, the what, and the how. Where's the why? The why can be baked into some of the context documents, but really this is your job. You have to know why you're asking your employee to do any particular job. If you ask your employee to mop the floor at the end of the night, you have a reason, you have a why. Sometimes it makes a lot of sense to explain to that employee, you need to mop the floor at the end of the night because the health inspector shows up always in the morning to see what the floor have to mop the floor because we had a pest issue last year. And if we're not spick and span, that pest issue will return. Whatever the why is, you should be clear on it. And sometimes it makes sense to also explain to the AI that we're doing this because of this, and it will also put your instructions in this larger context of everything else. Again, the AI is not thinking. It can't produce a real why. You are the artist, you are the architect, you are the business owner, and this is your job. As you get more complicated with your work of the AI, you can start to help it prompt you to make sure you're on the same page. That's a little bit like next level AI use. So for now, you just want to be thoughtful of when you're giving it instructions, if it makes sense to explain why you're doing this, that's helpful. One of the ones, an example I'll give you is when I ask an AI project to create an Instagram caption, I have a specific line that needs to be put into the caption to trigger my automation for grocer's list. So that automation, when somebody says, send me the recipe, has to be written that exact way, and then the URL has to be put into the caption for that automation to be triggered. So that's a reason where I do say to it, this has to be there because I need that automation to work, so don't mess it up. Okay, we went over the who, the what, the how. You're the one who's in control of the why. As you construct, you design, you create these systems with the AI projects. What's next is going to be 3 more videos in this mini course. The next one, we are going to create a recipe formatting guide. Next will be the brand and style guide. And that's where you're going to really clarify who you are, how to test and iterate. That will be the last video, and I'll give you some instructions about how to take all this logic in this system and test your work, test your context documents a couple times, and then if there's any issues, how you might reformat those context documents to get even better outputs the next time. I'll see you in the next video.